Chapter 39 of Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Simon Evers. Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens. Chapter 39, in which another old friend encounters Smike, very opportunely and to some purpose. The night, fraught with so much bitterness to one poor soul, had given place to a bright and cloudless summer morning, when a north country mail coach traversed with cheerful noise the yet silent streets of Islington, and, giving brisk note of its approach with the lively winding of the guard's horn, clattered onward to its halting-place hard by the post-office. The only outside passenger was a burly, honest-looking countryman on the box, who, with his eyes fixed upon the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, appeared so wrapped in admiring wonder as to be quite insensible to all the bustle of getting out the bags and parcels, until one of the coach windows being let sharply down, he looked round and encountered a pretty female face, which was just then thrust out. "See there, lass!" bawled the countryman, pointing towards the object of his admiration. "There be Paul's Church. He be a sizable one, he be." "Goodness, John, I shouldn't have thought it could have been half the size. What a monster!"
"Monster, you're about right there, I reckon, Mrs. Brownie," said the countryman good-humouredly, as he came slowly down in his huge top-coat. "And what does thou take yon place to be? None thou over there. You never come near it gin you thrive for 12 months. It's now but a post-office. Ha, ha! They need to charge for double I, there's a post-office. What's thou think of that? Egod, if that's only a post-office, I'd like to see where the Lord Mayor of London lives." So saying, John Browdie, for it was he, opened the coach-door, and tapping Mrs. Browdie, late Miss Price, on the cheek as he looked in, burst into a boisterous fit of laughter. "Whee!" said John. "Dang my buttons if she bain't been asleep again."
"She's been asleep all night, and was all yesterday, except for a minute or two now and then," replied John Browdie's choice, "and I was very sorry when she woke, for she's been so cross." The subject of these remarks was a slumbering figure, so muffled in shawl and cloak that it would have been a matter of impossibility to guess at its sex, but for a brown beaver bonnet and green veil which ornamented the head, and which, having been crushed and flattened for 250 miles in that particular angle of the vehicle from which the lady's snores now proceeded, presented an appearance sufficiently ludicrous to have moved less risible muscles than those of John Browdie's ruddy face.
"Hullo!" cried John,
twitching one end of the dragged veil.
"Come, waken up, will ye?"
After several burrowings into the old corner, and many exclamations of impatience and fatigue, the figure struggled into a sitting posture, and there, under a mass of crumpled beaver and surrounded by a semicircle of blue curl-papers, were the delicate features of Miss Fanny Squeers.
"Oh, Tilda!" cried Miss Squeers, "how you been kicking of me through this blessed night?"
"Well, I do like that," replied her friend, laughing, "when you've had nearly the whole coach to yourself."
"Don't deny it, Tilda," said Miss Squeers impressively, "because you have, and it's no use to go attempting to say you haven't. You mightn't have known it in your sleep, Tilda, but I haven't closed my eyes for a single wink, and so I think I am to be believed." With which reply Miss Squeers adjusted the bonnet and veil, which nothing but supernatural interference and an utter suspension of nature's laws could have reduced to any shape or form, and evidently flattering herself that it looked uncommonly neat, brushed off the sandwich crumbs and bits of biscuit which had accumulated in her lap, and, availing herself of John Browdie's proffered arm, descended from the coach.
"No," said John, when a hackney coach had been called, and the ladies and the luggage hurried in. "Gang to the Sarah's Head, ma'am."
"To the where?" cried the coachman.
"Law, Mr. Browdie," interrupted Miss Squeers, "the idea! Saracen's Head."
"Surely," said John, "I knowed it was something about Sarah's son's head. Does thou know that?"
"Oh, aye, I know that," replied the coachman gruffly, as he banged at the door.
"Tilda, dear, really," remonstrated Miss Squeers, "we shall be taken for I don't know what."
"Let them take us as they find us," said John Browdie. "We don't come to London to do nowt but 'joy ourselves."
"I hope not, Mr. Browdie,"
replied Miss Squeers, looking singularly dismal.
"Well then," said John, "it's no matter. I've only been a married man 4 days, account of poor old father dying and putting it off. Here be a wedding party, bride and bridesmaid, and the groom. If a man don't dare enjoy himself now, when ought he, eh? Drat it all, that's what I want to know."
That he might begin to enjoy himself at once and lose no time, Mr. Browdie gave his wife a hearty kiss, and succeeded in wresting another from Miss Squeers, after a maidenly resistance of scratching and struggling on the part of that young lady, which was not quite over when they reached the Saracen's Head. Here the party straightway retired to rest, the refreshment of sleep being necessary after so long a journey, and here they met again about noon to a substantial breakfast, spread by direction of Mr. John Browdie in a small private room upstairs, commanding an uninterrupted view of the stables. To have seen Miss Squeers now, divested of the brown beaver, the green veil, and the blue curl-papers, and arrayed in all the virgin splendour of a white frock and spencer, with a white muslin bonnet and an imitative damask rose in full bloom on the inside thereof, her luxuriant crop of hair arranged in curls so tight that it was impossible that they could come out by any accident, and her bonnet-cap trimmed with little damask roses, which might be supposed to be so many promising scions of the sprig rose. To have seen all this, and to have seen the broad damask belt, matching both the family rose and the little roses, which encircled her slender waist, and by a happy ingenuity took off from the shortness of the spencer behind, to have beheld all this, and to have taken further into account the coral bracelets, rather short of beads, and with a very visible black string, which clasped her wrists, and the coral necklace which rested on her neck, supporting, outside her frock, a lonely cornelian heart, typical of her own disengaged affections. To have contemplated all these mute but expressive appeals to the purest feelings of our nature might have thawed the frost of age, and added new and indistinguishable fuel to the fire of youth. The waiter was touched. Waiter as he was, he had human passions and feelings, and he looked very hard at Miss Squeers as he handed the muffins. "Is—" asked Miss Squeers with dignity.
"Beg your pardon, miss?"
"My pa," repeated Miss Squeers. "Is he in?"
"In where, miss?"
"In here, in the house," replied Miss Squeers. "My pa, Mr. Wackford Squeers. He's stopping here. Is he at home?"
"I didn't know there was any gentleman of that name in the house, miss," replied the waiter. "There may be in the coffee-room."
May be. Very pretty this indeed. Here was Miss Squeers, who had been depending all the way to London upon showing her friends how much at home she would be, and how much respectful notice her name and connections would excite, told that her father might be there. "As if he was a feller," observed Miss Squeers with emphatic indignation.
"You better inquire, man," said John Browdie, "and hold up another pigeon pie with—"
"Dang the chap," muttered John, looking into the empty dish as the waiter retired.
"Does he call this a pie? 3 young pigeons and a trifling matter of steak, and a crust so light that you don't know where it's been in your mouth and where it's gone. I wonder how many pies goes to a breakfast."
After a short interval, which John the ham and a cold round of beef, the waiter returned with another pie, and the information that Mr. Squeers was not stopping in the house, but that he came every day, and that directly he arrived he should be shown upstairs. With this he retired, and he had not retired 2 minutes when he returned with Mr. Squeers and his hopeful son.
"Why, who'd have thought of this?"
said Mr. Squeers, when he had saluted the party and received some private family intelligence from his daughter.
"Who indeed, pa?" replied the young lady spitefully. "But you see, 'Tilda is married at last."
"And I stand threat for a sort of London, schoolmaster," said John, vigorously attacking the pie.
"One of them things that young men do when they get married," returned Squeers, "and as runs through with their money like nothing at all. How much better wouldn't it be now to save it up for the edication of any little boys, for instance? They come on you," said Mr. Squeers in a moralizing way, "before you're aware of it. Mine did upon me."
"Will he pick a bit?" said John. "I won't myself," returned Squeers, "but if you'll just let little Wackford tuck into something fat, I'll be obliged to you."
"Give it him in his fingers, else the waiter charges it on, and there's lots of profit on this sort of victuals without that. If you hear the waiter coming, sir, shove it in your pocket and look out the window. Do you hear?" "I'm away, father," replied the dutiful Wackford. "Well," said Squeers, turning to his daughter, "it's your turn to be married next. You must make haste."
"Oh, I'm in no hurry,"